Welcome back to Slow Love Unravelled. This week's podcast episode is actually going to be a two-parter. We are going to deep dive into our marketing strategy, and we have our first guest with us, producer Abbie, who is also our social media manager. Say hi, Abbie.
Hello. I'm Isabel, by the way.
Yeah.
I didn't get an intro today.
Sorry.
I'm old news.
Everyone knows your name by now.
Yeah, they do.
This is one of the things that we get asked a lot about, and I did a TikTok which kind of fell flat on its face about our marketing spend and what we do with our marketing, mainly because we show up a lot on Instagram, which I'm gonna end up summarising it, and then you'll be like, I don't need to listen to the rest of it. So we'll start off.
We'll just make a start.
Sorry.
So actually, from the beginning, if I've got my facts straight,
Yeah.
you knew you wanted kind of help with marketing from day one, almost. Not day one, but
Yeah. Abbie was my first hire, but she also was... It's weird because actually marketing is the thing I feel most confident in doing, other than how the knitwear looked. It was like the thing that I knew how to do to a degree, but I felt very confident with it, but it was the one thing that I just knew I needed to invest in first. So although, there was an earlier stage before I'd left my full-time job where I had started to engage different strategies, which we will talk about later, but I contacted Abbie, and it was... Had I moved into the office? I think it was my first week. I moved into the office, into that room in there, which is our main sort of where we all sit in that one room. And it was just me on that one desk on my own. And I'd already, by that point, I'd been interviewing different agencies, and I'd done like webinars and stuff, because at that point my desk was Aurora's bedroom at home. So I had loads of interviews in my daughter's teenage bedroom. And it just felt like this was my personal experience. Lots of people didn't return my phone calls because nobody had heard of me, I think. And maybe it was just a waste of time if you're kind of unheard of. And this is, so many starting founders probably have this tumbling block where I was like, this is ridiculous. Nobody wants to take me seriously. And by within the first sort of month between then and moving in here, we were already, I was already generating a lot of sales. So it was really short-sighted. And actually one agency invited me to take part in a webinar, and we all had to, at the end, obviously it's a sales pitch, but you had to say how many sales you generated, and then that particular company did hound me. I mean, she was brilliant actually, but I knew that I probably wanted somebody that I could see face to face each week. And then a local coffee shop who had exploded on TikTok, I'd gone to get my morning coffee, and they asked if I worked nearby, and then I said I just moved into the office, but I was looking for somebody to help me with my marketing, and they gave me Abbie's name, and that's how we met. She was straight on it. I DM'd her whilst I was waiting for my coffee, whilst they were making my coffee, and she'd already got back to me by the time I'd walked back to the office, so she was on it.
which is like 2 minutes. A 2-minute walk.
Yeah.
Straight in.
Legend.
Yeah.
To be fair, I think it's really the one thing that I always say that you were like really good at was when I first met you. We went for coffee, and I proposed 3 different options for Holly, and she just went straight in for the biggest one. I was like, sweet. She was like my highest paying client at that point, and I was like so buzzed. But it was just mental how you'd literally just started, and how like you'd obviously made some sales, but you hadn't really done a massive amount yet, and you just went straight in, big guns.
Office and Abbie.
Yeah.
But I think that in hindsight, that makes me feel that the sort of nervous woman in me about spending any money, I'm like, why feels like it was kind of a silly move, but actually really it wasn't, because I had so much confidence in the design. But I also knew that by hiring Abbie, it was gonna keep me on the straight path to be. I ultimately knew for the Instagram. This is for Instagram and TikTok. We started off doing a bit of TikTok, but Instagram just kind of really took off. So we focused on that. But it was like the Instagram. I knew that I had to be consistent, but if I didn't have any, because I was paying Abbie, much like a personal trainer, which I know I always use this comparison all the time. Personal trainers are an investment, but for me, I always think there's no point hiring a personal trainer if you are not going to do the majority of work on your own, because you're investing in yourself by hiring a personal trainer. But what's the point if you just do it once a week? Which was my thought entirely about hiring Abbie. She was a huge outlay for me, more than my office rent. But I knew that by hiring her, I was like, I have to show up online. So although you would do really good and you'd like structure stuff and you would do the sort of trending, and I was so awkward doing it, we'd have to have like a glass of wine before each one in the afternoon. I'd always be like, can you come in the afternoon because I need to have a glass of wine before I do it, because I shat myself. Not literally, but I knew I was really uptight and uncomfortable, so I had to do it to loosen me up. But by having Abbie and knowing that I was investing in her, that was all I needed to make sure that I was showing up online every day.
Keeping you accountable.
Yes.
Yeah. 100%.
That's the perfect word.
I think it's really important though to say that even though you hired me from the beginning to like help you with doing videos and doing content and all of that, you also did so much yourself, which I think is a big thing that helped the business actually take off. Because yeah, you can hire someone to do stuff, but there was only a certain amount that I was doing. There was other things that had to be done as well, which Holly was really good at, like engaging with customers, which was something I wasn't like paid to do. So I was doing the content and everything, and Holly was, like commenting and DMing people all the time and engaging with customers, which I think is something a lot of people miss out on. They think they'll just hire a company to do it, they'll pay them to do it, and then they don't need to do anything. Whereas unless you're paying them proper big bucks to do literally everything and work on it full time, then you should do some yourself.
Yeah, I honestly, in the early days, the majority of my time was spent responding to DMs, I think.
Yeah.
I was like inundated with the same sort of questions. So in hindsight, I should have, we should have done a sort of shop by size feature really early on, so that we could help people by referring to our shop by size feature. And it was just me, and I'm, sort of a small, quite petite, so it was really unhelpful because I couldn't really help. I couldn't say, well, this person in the office is this size and height, and this person is this size and height, and she wears this, which is what we started doing as more people joined, which was more helpful. But
I think you say you were like, we should have done it sooner. But the thing is, the budget wasn't there to do it sooner. So like, if we
didn't have the help.
Yeah, didn't have the people
or the space. Like if you think, I mean, you were outside and that office. And at the time, that office had all the stock, the desks. Do you remember how much stuff we used to have to manoeuvre around when I first started?
Just so we had a corner.
Yeah. So you could have one little corner of the office. But I think from day one, and also from me as a customer to begin with, before I started, I remember the consistency being, from day one, it kind of felt like a much bigger brand than it was, which I do think is something which is really difficult to achieve. And it's not like an insincere thing. It's just that it showed a confidence, which for a customer perspective, I felt I really wanted the product. It was clear, it was so obvious that Holly, as the founder, loved it. She had the confidence in how amazing it was. It created this like really positive buying experience from the get-go, and I think you really definitely started as you mean to go on, and that has that kind of core meaning behind your marketing has remained from day one to now. With just
100%. I think
a bigger budget to spend.
Like
as
one
we've gone on.
Really big thing that we've done from day one is we've posted every single day. Like stories, posts every single day. And that's like where we always say consistency is key.
Yeah,
It is,
and they
yeah.
weren't super glossy. Like, and
No.
actually, I feel like that's something that you shared right from the beginning. I remember you saying it doesn't have to be perfect. Just
Yeah.
get it out there. And actually, sometimes not being perfect is so much more relatable to people because sometimes it can be quite off-putting buying from something that's like uber glossy. Like being really real is so nice.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's something we've done so well from the beginning, is being just like a normal person.
Yeah.
Like so many brands these days, which kind of goes on to what we were going to talk about in a bit, but so many brands these days, everything's perfect, especially when you're starting out. They want to have photographers, they want to do all of this perfect content, when that's such an outlay cost at the beginning.
It's a bit of a blocker as well,
It
isn't
is,
it? When you're already...
Yeah, it's like that kind of too professional and too boring, in my opinion.
Whoa!
Yeah. It's not engaging.
Yeah, exactly. And we've done like fun, engaging content. Like the content that actually performs the highest for us is all of our funny videos.
I know.
And it's just because we're normal people and we're having fun, and like people want to see normal people in the knitwear. They don't want to just see a model in the knitwear.
I mean, and also I think my, like, to begin with, as far as an actual how do you sell a product, and you always see this stuff on like TikTok now, and it's like you need to provoke a feeling, or you need to be doing X, Y, Z. You can't just be like, buy our cardigan. It was really, do you remember me saying it was like so important for us to show the quality, which is really hard to do when you don't have a shop. So I was like, the weight, it was like conveying the weight, but so we did do that to sort of always try and show, you know, how it fitted and the quality of the knit. But then the silly ones were which is funny, because actually our kind of target market, you wouldn't necessarily think that was what they were used to seeing. It felt initially like, oh, I feel like our customer is this age bracket, but we're really doing the like teenage sort of silly dancing trend ones, which was just like just so uncomfortable to do.
But I think like that's where you're doing, like we always say, do something different to everyone else. So that's where we did something different. Was we were also in that generation of like where content was changing to be fun and be exciting, and TikTok was emerging more. So that's like where we did something a bit different. And at the beginning, I literally would have to tell Holly to smile all the time, because you wouldn't believe it now, because she's so good at it, but at the beginning,
makes perfect.
I was
not
always
perfect.
like, Holly, you look really miserable. Please, can you
Yeah.
smile?
Please just smile. I was like, I've got a resting bitch face. Please
Holly
just,
Queen resting bitch face.
Yeah.
please just tell me to smile like it does it. Like just be brutal. And you
I
were
remember the
brutal.
first video you dragged me into, which was that today's gonna be a good day, and I didn't know. I was still in like very much the early phases of me starting, and it was like I remember you being like, how do you feel about being in a video? And I am so happy to be, you know, I don't love having my photo taken so much, but I'm not highly strung about these things at all. And I was like, yeah, like, I'll do whatever you need. And then that was it. Then you were like,
You're great.
you're in.
Yeah.
You're not going anywhere.
Well, you're in. But that still makes me smile, that video.
Yeah. Well, it was just great to have another person, because it's so much more fun doing
Yeah.
stuff with more people
It
involved.
takes the pressure off as
Yeah.
well. That's why the treehouse shoot did so well, because
Yeah.
Heidi, you know, she is a professional photographer, but we were having to sort of, there were 12 of us, obviously, there's the 12 star signs, and we were having to like herd sheep, and bless, like so many of the family, the guys especially, who were not used to it, including Ben, were obviously shy, but because we've been so used to doing it together, and Isabel is so good at just like being
a fluffer.
being a fluffer, being really confident. And Heidi did say it made it a really easy shoot, because where the guys were just a little bit awkward, it didn't take long for them to relax. Like those shots of Connor are so good.
Yeah, so Connor is Holly's cousin's husband,
He's got a great bum.
Connor. He is a cattle farmer.
Yeah, I don't know the technical. He's
Yeah.
He's a farmer.
He looks after cows for a living, but he got roped in as a 12th body. So yeah, he was definitely a very like green in the field of modelling, but his shots were so good.
They were so good, and he was a ledge. He was like, I'm here, I'll do whatever you ask, basically. I just want to do my required job.
We were like, be careful what you ask for, Connor, because
What was even better was on the second day, so the day after we did the shoot, we did some content in the morning, and then basically as soon as 12 o'clock hit, all of the alcohol came out. And by about 5 o'clock, we got those very good TikToks.
Oh yeah,
everybody being very loose.
And my cousin Tom was really up for like you just doing loads of behind the scenes content of changing, and now he's in all our ads. So thanks for that, Tom.
Yeah.
So with after meeting Abbie, you guys definitely had like I think when I started, maybe you were in like once. Like half a day a week or something.
Not even that.
Not even that.
You definitely were in every week.
I'd come in for 2 hours every week.
That's it. And then I remember you leaving Holly like homework, being like, "This is what you need to film today. These are the kind of things you need to do more of this." But that was kind of my point. Is that model has really carried on.
Yeah.
You're obviously now in the office 3 days a week, so that's kind of got much bigger, and you're managing a lot more, but.
What was great was just going back to what you said though, where Abbie would just be like, I am actually much more of a perfectionist than I probably show, or you might disagree, maybe I do show it, but I get quite particular about how I want things to be filmed or how I wanted them to look. But Abbie was very much more like I am in general with the business, but you were like, it's never going to be perfect, people don't care that much. You just need to get them out, and that has always been how we've obviously. There's an element of what we wouldn't show if we really didn't think. There's been I think out of the entire however many years now, there's probably been like maybe 2 or 3 times when I've messaged you and been like, I don't think we can show that one, or I really don't. But considering how many reels have gone out, it's really not been that many.
There's also there's only a certain amount of hours in the day, isn't there, that if you were trying to make everything perfect, it would just be so disheartening if it was like, oh God, we spent all this time doing this.
The annoying thing is the reels that take loads of planning and loads of chat and loads of are like the ones that won't perform that well, but then you do like a really stupid one and you get like insane amount of views, which is sometimes can be a bit soul destroying, I think.
Yeah, but that's one thing that I do think you were so good at the beginning, and even now, like, you just let me get on with it, and I just post, and half the time Holly doesn't even see the content before it goes out, and that is really, that does save a lot of time, because there is a lot of times when, like, people would, you know...
micromanage what you're doing.
Exactly, and that has definitely leads to just you spending so much more time on correcting things, and if it's just something so minor... that it's just like, it's just not worth it.
I think something you guys both shared as well is you both had a confidence in your product. You had a real confidence in the jumpers, and you had a real confidence in what works. Because I don't think, I can imagine, and I might be speaking out of turn here, but if somebody who was just starting was listening to this, do lots of marketing people like put you on a retainer so that you have to pay for like 3 months? Do you know what I mean? That kind of model, or is it? That's obviously a scary thing. It's a scary outlay. So maybe look for somebody in marketing who has that confidence in their product that they don't need to go on a retainer or something. I don't know if that's
a lot of like agencies or anything will put you on like 3 months or even 6 months. They'll like bring like you have to sign up for. I was just like, we'll just do it month by month. And we'll just, you know, if you don't want me to stay, you just have to let me know.
Pack your little bags and off you go. No, but you're right, because other agencies we've used for different things have always been on retainers. You can always, I mean, like you say, if you are just starting a brand or anything, you know, a business of any type, and you need to that retain that amount of months that you have to sign up for, you can always negotiate it. It's like, especially before you've signed, like people want your work, so I've always negotiated that, because it makes me feel like I'm not taking such a risk. When, like you say, if you feel that it's actually helping your business grow, then you are going to keep them on. So
yeah, exactly. Anyway, Going back to like the beginning, because I feel like what we were going to talk about was how our marketing went from a very organic kind of style from the beginning, which we've obviously kept all the way through, but how we grew the account from the beginning to kind of where we've got to now. And
actually, just saying that we haven't got a big following in the grand scheme of things.
Yeah, of course.
We actually have a really humble following, but I feel like from what you've done, those amount of followers, which I know there'll be people who are starting out who will think, oh my, how do you get to that number? But actually, it is, for a brand our size, it is still quite a fairly small number, but I feel like that number are very engaged.
Yeah, 100%. So like,
which is all that matters.
Yeah, and I think so. Obviously, from the beginning, I'd say for like the first year, and I also think it was just before we reached 10,000 followers, everything was organic. So we were posting every day on TikTok and Instagram. You're engaging loads. So we basically
always engaging on the stories.
Yeah, 100%. And we were basically made that 10,000 followers community before any like ads came into it. Obviously, there was probably a few influencer posts and things.
Yeah.
We did do one TikTok. I remember me and Holly are really obsessed with Grace Beverley. I think everybody is in the office now, but we did share that love for her at the beginning. And we were like, wouldn't it be so cool if Grace wore one of the jumpers one day? So I did this TikTok where it was like day one of trying to reach Grace Beverley.
This was a whole planned out campaign as well. There was a lot of thought behind this.
There was, and it was like day one of trying to reach her so she can like wear our knitwear or something. And I think it was like day 2, she'd commented. I was like, great, all those videos that
we are very appreciative. She did contact Abbie.
For God's sake, Grace, you ruined my 5-day plan by engaging on day 2.
I had loads of TikToks ready, and I was like, oh no, I can't use them. But it was, I remember messaging Holly, and we were literally like, I'd love to...
I remember that day. I was here. I think I'd started then. It was so good.
Yeah, I'd love to be able to find our WhatsApp messages because we were going quite crazy. And then we obviously sent Grace a jumper. I think she's got both of the Feel Goods now.
Yeah, she has.
And then a few months later, she posted on her story in it, and I think that day we gained 2,500 followers, which was absolutely bonkers. I remember just refreshing the feed, and it was nuts.
I was in the bath when she posted. You messaged me, I hadn't even seen it, and you were like, no.
Yeah,
that's cool.
It was so amazing. But like, so obviously we'd done something like that at the beginning, which was all organic. So that had gave us like a good platform, and obviously like a few bits of influencer marketing. But apart from that, it was all organic right from the beginning.
Even the influencers you targeted from the get-go, they weren't just random picks. Like Holly, I remember you saying, I want to work with people who are already engaged in my brand. So you looked at people who were already following, or I mean, we've spoken about this in a previous podcast, but the first influencer you worked with was somebody who was, you aimed high.
I did aim high. I mean, that was a huge, and so bearing in mind for probably the first 2 years, once Slow Love Knitwear was official, for probably the first 2 years we didn't do any paid work. Not because we didn't feel that influencers weren't worth being paid. Like, I'll make that very clear now. We just, because as Isabel said, we always did this our strategy was more like we only wanted to gift to influencers who were already organically engaging with us, because then we knew that they would wear the knitwear time and time and time again, which is just a very sincere, it shows that they love the knitwear, and we're not trying to send out something that actually nobody cares about, and people still Harling Ross was like a random one. I gifted her a feel good. So Harling Ross was Leandra Madine, so the man repeller in New York. When that was going, Harling Ross was like her number 2, and I sent one to her, and she wore it loads, and so it was like that trickle down effect. And so but the influencer who I'd contacted was so lovely, and she was the perfect fit of like how I saw the jumper being styled.
I'm going to try and get the picture.
Yeah.
It's still one of my favourite pictures.
We need to show this on the podcast, I think, of Pernell wearing it. And I contacted her and said, you know, how much would it cost? This is the jumper. And before anybody else had seen it, and then she came back to me with her fee, and I just said, well, I don't have the budget for that, but you know, I would love to work with you later down the line one day. And she was so sweet, and she basically said how much she loved the jumper, and she gave me a really like amazing discount, basically, which it was still a lot of money, don't get me wrong, but it was a huge risk, but it paid off. And she was brilliant to work with. It was a really quick turnaround. I didn't give her any sort of script to work with, and it felt like a really organic post, and literally within a minute of her posting, somebody bought one. So it just worked from the get-go. But also what it did was validate how cool the jumper was to then the sort of network of influencers tiered below her. That worked well.
I'm trying to scroll
Another
down.
really good example of a great influencer who was engaging with us a lot before I contacted her was A History of Architecture.
Oh God, yeah, I love her. And
she's still, you know, loads of other knitwear brands work with her now, but she was so amazing from the beginning, and we sent her quite a few different pieces, and she loved it and wore them all the time, and her post did really well. She's just cool as fuck. So
oh God, I love looking at old Insta.
I know.
Scrolling right down into the depths.
But that was
so
so
nice.
that was our sort of that was everything.
Yeah.
Everything was organic. And if you are just starting and aren't used to sort of using Instagram, I know that most people are, but when we say organic, we mean it was all just content that wasn't being boosted, or we weren't paying for any ads.
Yeah. It's all free. Like, literally, posting on Instagram is free. Obviously, for Holly, she was paying me to do it, but when you're starting out, use as much as that free marketing that you can do, like, as much as possible. It's literally your time. So, like...
Which, again, I feel like some people don't... When I would say I need to go and do content, at the beginning, it was... it makes you feel like you're just being a bit silly. But it's like, well, no one is going to sell my jumper better than I will because it's my brand.
And that comes back to like having that confidence in your product.
Yeah, 100%. And knowing that what you're doing. And it wasn't until, you know, we sat down with Vicky, who's been sort of helping me with a bit of like mentoring, and she was like, you realise that the amount that you are doing for your own marketing, you are basically like a salary, another person's salary with the time that you put in just on your own. Which is, when you look at it like that, it's like, whoa.
Yeah. But I think that leads on to the point that we were going to make about how you are the face of the brand and how that's done so well for us.
Yeah.
Which at the beginning, you were the face of the brand because couldn't afford a model. There was no one else that was going to do it, so you kind of had to be the face of the brand, which a lot of brands are doing these days, and it does work really well. But it's something we've said from the beginning that we always want to keep. Yeah. Which, like Odd Muse, they do so well as well. And you can see how that's kind of catapulted them. But you just like having the face of the brand. I think it's like people feel like they relate to you and they feel like they're friends with you.
Yeah,
and
I think it's the establishing trust, which is something that we talk about a lot.
Yeah,
because I think where the only trouble with that a little bit was that when you are the face the whole time, and it was me doing the lion's share of posting and being online, is that if then the customer service aspect of like people ordering or stuff gets lost in the post, or people want to know that they were dealing with me, and I would get DMs about it, 11 o'clock at night, or especially as we have so many international customers, that was a tricky one to transition with, I think.
Yeah, I remember being like, Holly, you need to turn your Instagram notifications off because this is a lot for you to deal with. Like every day it was just non-stop. You'd never sleep well, you would obviously, but like you couldn't sleep because there was just so many. You just look at your phone and there'd be a message or something. So definitely
and just
turn your notifications
yeah
off.
I think also it's that hard thing where people, I think this is a much bigger conversation, but where if you start your own business, and then I know that there are people who are like, well, I'm starting my business, but I have to have these boundaries because I have a family at home and I need to establish those from the beginning. But really, if you are going to try and grow a business, you don't have that option. You have to just do both. And I had to do both for a good couple of years. And on Sunday, when we were like in the middle of having Sunday lunch or doing whatever, and I'd have 3 DMs, I would just respond to it. But my children are older, so I was able to explain what was happening, and it kind of felt like they understood that the reason why I was on my phone the entire time.
Yeah.
But that's got easier because I now delegate that.
Yeah. But at the beginning, you literally don't have the budget, so you literally got to do everything, which obviously is very hard, but you got to do what you got to do.
Yeah.
I do feel like there have been really obvious like breaking points of like I have got to the point where I've started to drop balls in other areas because I'm doing this, and that's when those like changes have come. But kind of that shows how hard those pushes have been. Is that's then the growth has happened. You get to a breaking point, and then because that growth happened, you've got a little bit more budget to just give yourself a little bit more breathing space by taking on Abbie for an extra half a day, or outsourcing. I think even like from the photography perspective, when with the first photo shoot we did with Heidi, was it when we first brought the staple collection?
Yes. Yeah.
So we expanded the product range, which then meant we expanded into hiring a professional photographer for the day, and not from like a really glossy perspective. Holly's always loved the really cool street style element. So how did you meet Heidi?
It was from Heidi's getting a lot of airtime.
I know
Do
she
you
is.
think she's listened to any of
I
this?
don't know.
Heidi, we think you're great. But it was just because when I was following one of the London the street, like Fashion Week street style, and then I'd come across her Instagram because she was a professional street style photographer, and that's how I met her.
Yeah. So, but that was a really great example of we had pushed with what we had. We got to a point where we had introduced a new product, and then we had the budget to give that new product a different bit of airtime to what we had been doing up to date by getting Heidi and creating a different caliber or style of photography that we'd had before.
Yeah. And
actually that's a lie.
I'm looking at that. I know I've completely I worked with 2 other photographers before who were really amazing, and actually this was quite a good. But again, this is me having the mindset. I don't know whether you would be able to do this.
Probably not.
No, as in with these first 2 photographers, didn't ever meet them in person, although I actually ended up meeting one of them. I just sent them the knitwear. And one of them, to be fair to her, emailed me out the blue and was like, I'm a professional photographer, loads of my work was cancelled over COVID, I'm now doing like little jobs basically for smaller brands to do like content. Essentially, this is what it would cost you. You could send me your knitwear, I would find the models, and it would be this wrapped up cost, and you could use all the images, however many images there were. And I had a phone call meeting with her. She was great, sent the knitwear off, did that twice with her, and we still use some of her images to this day of the feel goods. And then with a different photographer we did a similar thing, but that was when we had one jumper design, and you could do, whereas now with the staple range we really had to be there because there was more I was more particular about how I wanted that styled. Whereas the feel goods, it was like you can wear them with a pair of leggings and it just looks cool. I was much more sort of had a clearer idea, and with it being more of a sort of bigger operation, it was like that in itself becomes content, doesn't it? So
you've got lots of like behind the scenes of that day, and but we had the bandwidth to do days like that, because Holly and Abbie had done these really like big pushes until you kind of get to those next stages. Just small and steady growth, but consistency, it was always there.
Yeah,
100%.
Right, what's up next?
So next kind of came was ads, wasn't it?
Yeah.
So I think we had about 10,000 followers. We've been going probably just over a year.
Yeah.
And then it was kind of like, you were like, I think we should start doing ads. And there was, before that, I was always like, just be careful you don't go too big too soon, because there's a lot of people that will, like, if you're just starting a business, will just jump straight into ads right at the beginning and just spend loads of money and then be like, oh, I've made no sales. Because nobody knows who you are, nobody trusts you. So when they see an ad, they just will probably like click buy, and then you're spending so much money on it. So it wasn't until that point where we had that trust and we had customers already that like investing in ads made sense.
Yeah. And it didn't feel, I think the thing with ads is it feels like it's a bit of a dark art.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I said this to you when we first started to do the ads, was I got to that by that point, like you say, we had tracked our organic like progress, and we knew how it worked. It was just like the intricacies and getting somebody to like get all of that onboarded. And by that point, I couldn't tell you how to set up a really, great, well-functioned ad, but I knew what content was working for us, and I knew what people were engaging with and what were the great selling points, or what worked really well as far as like selling a jumper. If I did a particular video, like what would work well. So it didn't feel like I was going in not really knowing what I was talking about. And again, the guys that we worked with were always, it wasn't a glossy operation, it was a team of 2 guys, and so it very much felt like it was quite sort of cozy the way that we'd had our relationship. Although we didn't see them, they weren't in the physically in the office with us, it did work.
Yeah. And you went into it you did know a little bit, but it was a very green operation, wasn't it? We didn't have like I remember you talking to me about the whole concept of ads, and I was like, God, I'm so far removed from this, and it felt really scary for me. But I think because you had the knowledge and then you had a little bit too, it was very much like your thing, and I kind of just stayed back and didn't get involved at all, and just didn't. I had no understanding of it. I mean, I still don't have a huge understanding of it, but much, kind of have learned bits along the way. But it does. I remember ads feeling really scary when we started doing them, because there were such huge knowledge gaps, and you are kind of having to put your trust in someone else to do something different to what has been working so well to date. Especially that you guys have been doing it from the get-go. It was all yours, and then relinquishing some of that,
it's a lot of money as well. Like, you obviously pay like someone to do it, but then you also pay the ad spend, and that's a lot of money to just part with each day, each week. So it is a big scary thing.
Should we talk about ad spend?
we again, the sort of the philosophy was go big or go home, which is exactly what we did. It was a lot. It was a lot of money. It was a lot of money. And actually, every time, and I say this a lot, but when I go back to one of the webinars before I'd hired Abbie that I did with people, and this agency that ran this webinar talked about, normally what a client would spend, what their retainer was, what their client would spend as far as ad spend, so their retainer and then the ad spend. And I just thought, never in a million years will I ever have the budget to do something like that. Never. And then 6 months later, it was quite crazy.
I think the first year of ads,
it worked.
It
definitely got us.
It really put you in front of people, and like it was one of those things. It's like you've gone from organic, you've made sales, you've made a kind of audience, but then the ads kind of catapulted you in front of more people, and like you were spending a lot of money on ads, but you were getting seen by a lot of people. Whereas like then this next year is like, oh, okay, it's like not as much money, like we've pulled it back a bit. So
I feel like in a way that naivety or areas of unknown that we had with the ads was in the end a real blessing.
Yeah.
Because had you known the inside and outs of how it all worked and the cost and like what percentage of your turnover you should be spending, I feel like there is no way we would have, well, not I feel like, there is no way we would have been seen or that it got our name out there as much as we did in that year had we known. So sometimes unknown and naivety is like such a powerful thing in a brand, because it gives you a placebo bravery that you don't know you have, because you literally don't know.
When you think about, if I think about the sort of the sort of guys that will go in, and I say guys only because the two people I've met who do this are both guys, but I'm sure women do it as well, and probably more efficiently. Is that they go in and will basically look at how all your financial planning budgets, you know, where you can afford to spend money, where you can't, and I can guarantee you my ad spend would have been squashed within the first week.
Yeah.
If I had anyone else looking over my shoulder and telling me where I should and shouldn't have spent that money, anybody would have, any of those that type of person would have looked at that spend and been like, you're crazy, absolutely no way, switch it off.
Yeah.
And it was a really bold move, and it was a scary amount of money, but I feel like it worked, like you say, and we had that,
we
all
learned
had that
so
trust.
much in that year, like and we obviously made mistakes. We were ploughing money into ads of products that we didn't have in stock, and it took which sounds so silly, but again, it was, you know, there are massive cons in that, but the pros were it carried on getting the name out. We learnt very quickly then, you know, how much money we had spent on this, which has allowed us to refine it so well now. And now we have a really well-oiled cog. Yeah.
The way we did have wait lists open, so
it wasn't for nothing.
Yeah,
it wasn't for nothing. Actually, those if any out of stock products that we knew were getting back in, those ads then did generate wait lists, which are a great thing to have. That helped us do things like know what we should spend our money on in the next tranche of ordering and forecasting. So all of these things happen for a reason, I think. But I feel like we didn't ever spend money that we didn't necessarily have. It did definitely cause some pretty major financial pinch points.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was like a happy mistake in the end, really.
Yeah. And it wasn't until Vicky started working on our roadmap that she was like, there's a pretty big red flag here at the moment.
I remember
we both
that
were
moment.
Like naughty school.
It was just
kids,
we were just like eyeing in a triangle, because she was like, if you could just work out your ad spend for me in the last 12 months, and I was like, this feels quite big, but I don't know what good or bad or big or small really looks like in this area. And then Vicky's face, I feel like, is etched in our brains forever. And Vic closed the door, and when Holly's stressed, she just goes, "Ooh, I'm a little bit stressed." I mean, and that's when you know she's stressed. But I do remember that moment when Vicky left, and gosh, that's made me a little bit stressed, that look. But it was kind of the best thing, and Vicky did caveat that with, it's not ideal and this isn't sustainable, and the positives are that you've now got X, Y, and Z from that spend, but now you need to rein it back in, and we did, and we knew so much more, which allowed us to do that.
Yeah, and I think that kind of leads us on to, like, the first year we did, everything was organic. The second year there was a lot of money ploughed into ads and things like that, but then the kind of going into the third year, we've pulled it back, and now, like, we're spending money on ads, but not just Meta, Pinterest and Google, and then also
so when we talk about our ad spend, I don't know if we've clarified, that was only on Meta.
Yeah.
God,
That wasn't on Google, PPC, that wasn't on Pinterest. We weren't doing any newsletters.
Yeah.
Which is
my God, the
absolutely
newsletter.
fucking
That is
bonkers.
bonkers.
That
I
is.
remember I was saying to Holly for a little while, I was like, don't you think we should do email marketing? And I'd never done it before either, but I was like, I think we should probably do this. She was like, oh yeah, okay. And then like I said again like a week later and a few months later, and then she was like, oh yeah, let's do that. And I was like, okay.
I feel like that was actually a Grace Beverley podcast when she was talking about income generated from, and it was like a penny dropping for everyone. That was like, we've been talking about this for a long time. Again, this comes back to being a really small team with only a certain amount of hours in the day, just like Beyonce. Who remembers that? Who remembers that little nugget she dropped? Only a certain amount of hours in the day. And it was like, all of these things were just so floating around heads and all, but being able to go, right, what's the plan next?
And
it's hard.
Just saying that with not having, at that point, we were still packing all of our orders. So we fulfill everything here, but we were doing all the packing.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
the customer service.
So there was no free time to actually stand back for a minute and be like, there should be a more efficient way of us doing this.
Yeah.
We were just like in the thick of it, weren't we? And then you're right. So she did that. Also, I have such a fear of being hacked, and that was a big worry. Was we need to have a backup, and the newsletter feels like it is a backup.
Yeah.
But that Grace Beverley, she said about how God, Grace is getting a lot of airtime in this. Let's tag her in this podcast.
We really love you, Grace.
And as I literally always message her like a beggy little friend on her comments, if you ever want someone to interview for your podcast,
you know where to come.
But she said about not getting sign-ups to your newsletter is like having a really good night out, meeting some amazing people that could be lifelong friends, and then you just never take their phone number at the end of the night.
That is such a good analogy. Yeah, that is very true. But yeah, all of these things were just, I remember we'd have these big conversations, and then the day-to-day would take over, and then we'd have them again, and 1% of those conversations had happened since the last conversation because of bandwidth, like physical time.
Do you remember when we got was it the insurance guy? The insurance guy for the office, and we got the next room, and Isabel spoke to this insurance broker guy again, and he was like, so what sort of, obviously you have to give them figures to know what you need to the insurance to cover. He was like, hang on a minute, so this has been your growth in the past 6 months, whatever it is, and there's still just 2 of you. And Isabel was like, yeah, it's just the 2 of us.
Squeaky. Like dogs could hear me because we were so like, because he was like, okay, what are you spending on employees? And we were like, the same. We're just working more hours. But actually, I say that you've always been really very good at being like, there's a time limit to what I can achieve. That's actually
that's going to be productive.
Let's go home and we can be more productive tomorrow.
Yeah.
Ben was really hit the nail on the head yesterday. On a Tuesday, there's a lot of us in the office, and once it got to like 4:00, we had a lot of meetings yesterday, back to back as well. So if I was like, I'd hit my limit, and we all just got a little bit silly. And he was like, I don't feel like anyone has done anything productive in the past
between
hour.
4 or 5.
And I did say, I was like, that's why sometimes I'm like, let's just go for a drink.
Yeah.
Because honestly, there's no point of us carrying on pretending that loads is going to get done at this point.
Yeah.
It's just, it would be actually much nicer to have this conversation, but with a martini in our hand. Shout out to Matilda's.
I feel like, Matilda's. Matilda's is an amazing new little bar that's opened in our local town, which is run by a really gorgeous young couple who are about to just have their first baby as well. And they've become a little bit of a second home for us, haven't they?
Yeah.
We must be
lovely.
their best customers.
They are so lovely and equally as supportive of us.
Yeah.
Which is great.
Mm-hmm.
Love supporting other small brands.
Yeah. What is so I'm trying to think, what was our another big like marketing
milestone
and big push was taking creating the content out of the office and Cirencester and the odd day in Tetbury. And we then started doing a few more bits in Tetbury's another like little local town with just
and Cheltenham.
Cheltenham. And then we did some in London.
Yeah. I remember like me and Holly would just do it in the office, and then we'd go out in town and just go around the streets and take content, and it got to the point where it just got so boring. Even now, like if I go out in Siren, I'm like, where are we going to take pictures that's not the same that we've done before?
Yeah.
So we went to Tetbury one week, which was really random, and then we went to Cheltenham, which we did the leopard print in, which actually
and
was
the
really good.
The top of the
and I think then from then we'd go to London a few times, and it was just felt so fresh doing it somewhere else.
Yeah.
Which I think then kind of led on to like the following year, when you had that bigger budget available to do content in other places, you obviously went very
Holly's
big.
classic USP of go big or go home. We had that new product. It was the spaced out jumper,
which was so
was
sick.
epic.
Yeah.
It was such an epic like piece of newness for the brand. And you really kicked it off with like in a big bang way.
Yeah.
And this is Holly's brain as an entrepreneur compared to somebody who's not like me, as in like a bit more play it safe. And you thought it's a big old festival jumper.
I envisioned this jumper to be seen. So on the week leading up to Glastonbury, since I started Slow Love, it's always been the same. So we get like a rev up of people wanting a piece of knitwear to wear to Glastonbury. So we get these panicked emails, and I'm always so happy to do it. And people are like, I'm leaving tomorrow for Glastonbury, and I've just come across your jumper. I desperately want one. Please, can you make sure it gets to me in time? So we always are really accommodating with that. And I was like, this jumper will be the festival jumper. I want to kickstart it. I want to go to Coachella. Or I want to have it sent to somebody who will wear it to Coachella, which was the first that was the first thought process.
Yeah.
And then a friend of mine called Saf, who did live in LA, she was really amazing and was like, she works in marketing, so she was starting to look into like Slow Love in the States, basically. So we started to get some quotes back for giving it to influencers to wear to Coachella. And it was like, oh, I had no idea that they charge this much in the States. So
it was like 10 grand, wasn't it?
It was a lot of money. It was so much money for one reel and their tickets to Coachella.
Yeah.
And I was like, that's absolutely bonkers. Mm-hmm. And if, we haven't done any paid work with any influencers, and no, we haven't.
At that point, especially.
Yeah,
not really.
We haven't. And so I was like, if for instance, it was like a history of architecture who is so professional and amazing, and we've worked with her loads, I'm sure she wouldn't charge 10 grand for, I don't know how much she charges, but I wouldn't feel like such a risk if it was ticking all those boxes. I wouldn't ever pay anyone that amount of money because we don't have the budget to spend that on one person. But it would feel, at least I would have I would feel like I would kind of guaranteed it would work because I've worked with her before, but this was just like, no way. And then my friend Saf was like, why don't you just go to Coachella then and do it yourself? And I was like, it will be way less money for me to do that. So yeah, we didn't have much in the bank at that point. So I came in on the Monday and was like, by the way, I'm going to Palm Springs next week with Grace, and I'm taking my brother as a bodyguard and a driver.
And a male model.
Yeah. And a male model, as it happens, yeah. And this is what we're going to do to kickstart festival season for the knitwear. Yeah.
And that was, I think, in a previous, if you've listened to our previous podcasts, we speak a lot actually about risk, and it wasn't a shot in the dark. Holly had a really real confidence in the product, that it would look great at a festival. The budget wasn't on paper necessarily there, so the risk was, we don't really have this money to spend, or we need this money for our next VAT bill, but I know this is going to perform so well, I'm just going to do it. And that's what she did. But those risks are of, you know, in areas of the business are hard but important. And I remember sitting there being like, fuck, I mean, fair play. And it did pay off, because I think you had that confidence there.
Do you know what was crazy was the one shot that I really wanted was the shot of me in the spaced out jumper on those rocks in Joshua Tree. So it looked like I was on Mars. That was like the thing I was going for. And we had a half an hour window where the weather was like that. We were there at 7 a.m. in Joshua Tree, which was a good sort of 50 minutes, I think, from Palm Springs where we were staying. And in the middle of nowhere, and we had half an hour as the sun had come up before it got cloudy. And if it was cloudy, those shots wouldn't have been the same. So all of that stuff.
Let's caveat that with you did properly. Not you didn't shoot from the hip with the decision to go to Palm Springs, but once that decision was made, the hours of planning that then go into those content trips is a lot. It's the timings, the flights, hiring of cars, even the styling. Like I remember the styling for those 5 days, and also these guys only went for 5 days, and like doing all of that, you didn't even factor in time to get over any jet lag. It was
less. It was It was 3 nights.
3 nights, and which is just mental. So I think, you know, don't take this as just do what you want and book flights, catch flights, not feelings. Book flights and just willy nilly. Like it was a more considered decision, and the planning that went into it was so huge. Once those decisions have been made, and that's then actually stood us in good stead for further content trips. That the success off the back of that was so good that we've continued to use that model, and actually when we've done we're doing much more obvious drops than we used to in the first 2 years or the first year. The second year was much more considered. We now do go on the trip, so we did France,
we did Provence, and then
to do the sports collection. New York was actually another. There definitely, and Abbie will be really aware of this, there are such obvious times in growth, and it's like, it really feels like there's something big coming. And I can't remember what we had a really big vac quarter, and it was just, again, another financial pinch point, and Holly had floated the idea of New York, and I remember talking to Abbie and saying, oh God, I'm just nervous, like blah, 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 blah. I'm not sure if this is the right thing. You know, we were taking a lot of the team out of the business because there was basically us three plus Grace, who's our designer, and it just felt like a big thing. And Holly just came bounding through the door, and she was like, flights for New York, but guys, and I was like, it was kind of the Palm Springs thing again. But again, it was the same model. It was tight, but we had the confidence it was going to work, and then planning was big for New York.
The New York thing was that it's like any holiday. As far as the like cost of the travel, it's like the earlier you book, the better price you get.
And actually the flights
like quadrupled by the time we went.
Yeah,
and our hotel was actually ended up being like the cost of one of our flights there. And you know, there could be an argument that maybe 4 of us didn't need to go out, but actually we did, because somebody's always behind the camera, so it's always 3 people in a shot. And it's it's the vibe, isn't it? That's the fun.
I think like New York was where we really kind of took that next step with our content trips, because we vlogged the whole thing. We did a lot of behind the scenes. We did a lot of
live
reels. We did live. Like we did so much more on that trip than we did on like France. And obviously we were there for an extra day. I think it was maybe 2. We were traveling a lot for that. But we really kind of took it to the next level, and I think that made the excitement for the drops so much better. And like I had so much content for like the next 2 months. I was like, this is great.
Actually, I do remember you having that really kind of purpose conversation, which was actually, if you look at the cost and then you think how much content we get for that cost, you know, if we just spent if we just made content in that time, it'd probably be around the same. So it was always we are fluffing this and making it sound, that it isn't considered. It was very considered, but they were definitely, pinch pointy moments.
Yeah.
I feel like then it led on to the treehouse, which I think the treehouse was the one that we really smashed it with.
Yeah.
Like, the vibe was perfect for the knitwear.
We got so lucky with the weather.
Yeah.
That is obviously something you can't... And France was a perfect example of that.
France.
The weather in France in that time of year should have been wall-to-wall sunshine for those times. And we literally had...
An afternoon of
An
it.
afternoon of the day we arrived. And I hadn't slept at this point for 2 days. Because I didn't go to sleep before our flight because it was late leaving. And it was just like, we've got to get it done. And then we did absolutely make the best of the rest of the time. But weather is such a tricky one to navigate.
It is. But like you say, the best, some of those best pictures are the ones that Abbie took of us that afternoon when it was raining and we just got a bit pissed.
Yeah.
Again.
And we were throwing... Yeah, we went, so on the way to this chateau we stayed in, we went to like a Leclerc because it was essentially like it was a B&B, so we had to provide our own food. And we did our shopping sort of big stock up on the way to the chateau. And we were like getting some wine and you were like, oh, this will be enough, won't it? 2 bottles of rosé. I was like, you fucking kidding.
I think on the first night we drank like 5 bottles of wine.
Yeah, we did.
And I was like,
who
everybody
do you
else
think's going to have these 2 bottles?
Yeah.
It was literally gone in the first 45 minutes.
Yeah, but some of those shots, like, the ones of Grace sat round the pool
Yeah.
with like the glass, like, that's such a good shot because she was
Because
pretty
she's got
loose.
great abs.
And that.
Yeah.
But the ones of you guys with the cards and stuff inside, where it was like hammering it down with rain outside, and we were like, how are we going to get these shots because it's so dark in here? And I had like a light, like a little square hand light in my hand, and I was like,
and we
hovering
did
it over.
those takes how many times? Like 15 times, maybe.
Yeah.
I was like, again, somebody's face was different in this, and the card was in the wrong place, but it was so cool. And but you were definitely loose.
Yeah.
I think most of our best content is when
We've had a little tipple.
Yeah. So if
those photos when they were released, it was like when I had people that work within the industry who were messaging me being like, these are so amazing, what an amazing campaign. And I was like, this was a rainy afternoon, completely not what we planned, and just happened to be making the best of a sort of the situation that was out of our control.
I do think, like, when I planned for these kind of shoots, I always plan TikToks and kind of pictures we're going to get, but sometimes it's like when you just get there and we're all like, that's why it's good to have, 4 of us go.
My leg.
Sorry.
I just remember something so funny.
But like, that's why having 4 of us go is so good, because we're all like together, you kind of, everybody starts doing stuff and you all kind of have these ideas, and sometimes some of the stuff you don't plan for is the best stuff, which is like the treehouse shoot, the best video that we did, where, if you've seen on Instagram, we were all dancing like side to side. That got the most views, and we just plucked that out.
That was just off the
cuff because we were all having a great time.
Do you remember when we went to France? And I was lugging these suitcases up the steps, and this place we went, if you've seen the photos, was so beautiful. It's actually probably one of the most beautiful kind of scenery places I've ever been.
It's like
Holly found it in Vogue. No, you found it on Instagram, but it's been featured in Vogue.
Vogue done a shoot there.
So it has become a little bit of a destination for influencers, and the couple that own it was so lovely. But we all walked in, and the gentleman was like, "Where are your models?" And we were like,
"You're looking at them."
I was like sweating, like lugging this suitcase up the steps like this.
He was so disappointed.
He was like, "Oh,"
with our like phones as cameras.
Yeah, it was. Yeah. It was so funny. I was like, "Oh dear."
Oh.
We're not Vogue. I'm afraid.
We're not.
But
Vogue.
it was.
But it worked
just as good.
Yeah,
they were great.
Yeah.
They were great pickies.
And we've got our spring summer trips all booked.
Yeah. Not telling you where it is though. It's a secret.
It's very cool though.
We know. Abbie knows. You don't know. Anyway, marketing part 1 done.
Yeah.
Thank you.
If you guys ever have any questions as well, like always DM us and we'll definitely answer them on here. And we'll be as open and honest as humanly possible. Yeah?
See you for the next part.
Yeah, we'll see you for part 2. Thank you for tuning in.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.